Welcome, Fairfax community. Well, this is a very exciting podcast for me because the person that I'm speaking with today is very special to me and has had a massive influence on where my life has gone in the last 18 months and where it continues to go. I'm talking with business entrepreneur, life and business coach, Murray Mazarik from Real Education. I'm not going to say much more than that because I want you to look into Real Education and I want you to check it out. But Murray could speak for days and he is captivating, but we have a short period of time. So we're going to cover one topic today and then we're going to flow from there. Murray Mazarik, thank you so much for joining the Fairfax today.
Thank you, Ross. It's a privilege and an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you for asking me.
Murray, I don't want to give too much away before we kick into our topic. Can you give the listeners just a little sampling or a little taste of what real life education is about?
Okay, well, real education consists of real man, real woman, real life design, real relationships, a coaching school, real teens, real tantra. We have a variety of events that live within that sanctity and we facilitate those. But the main topic that we're going to talk about is most likely our real man or real woman workshop because it's a live-in, residential, total immersion, process style of an event through experiences. And as a result of that, we have, on our crew, some really well-trained crew that have been in for a long time. And they're a part of this amazing team. Then we co-create an amazing environment that is unlike anything else I know in the world. And we're in downtown Australia doing this, downtown, Sunshine Coast. And we have the luxury of really processing people and to explain the journey, it's the real man and the real woman are separate events. We just work with men, we just work with women, but they're parallel. Their processes are paralleled. And to give you an understanding, it's like for some men, it's the first time they get to run with the wolves. And for the women, it's the first time they get to run with the she-wolves. And they have an experience with their own gender, and we start to unbecome certain areas of our life. So that's just the process, and you do a rite of passage into your identity, which is an extraordinary event. But we have to unbecome who you're not in order to become the original script of you. Sorry about that. And I'm going to lead into there's a certain area with people where once upon a time they were very authentic, from 0 to 5, you were so authentic, so real, so everything. And then life changes around 5, and I'll explain that. So that's just an intro. I've been in real education now for 30 years. What 30 years means is that I have processed 13,000 individual people. It takes me 4 days to process a person. So what that's left me is with this library, this knowledge of like an encyclopedia of the human spirit and how they formed and created their lives. So that, in a nutshell, that's what real education's about.
Murray, you remember each of your processes, don't you?
I have a memory. I can barely remember my phone number, but I can remember every process, what people go through, and their whole reality. It's like, it's phenomenal what the memory I hold of people's processes from last year to say 25 years ago or 28. I can I bump into them. I go, hi, how you doing? They go, remember this? And it's like instant recall. So, I have this ability to draw up these memories, and, I may forget names, but I never forget the emotional transformation. When someone has a transformation and they transmute and they move into themselves, there's such a release of energy that comes out of them. It creates a vibrational frequency movement, and it goes through you. It's like, oh, there it is. And it lands inside. And I store that wealth of knowledge inside me. It's like I'm this library that keeps growing. And I'm enjoying that. I've been working with people for such a long time, and it gives me the luxury. And then I draw on, when I work with one individual, I draw on the last 13,000 individuals that I've worked with that has created massive results, massive transformation. And, we hear of some pretty intense stories around Australia and wherever we go. And they end up finding me, and I bring them home to incredible healing.
Murray, I've participated in 3 reels, 1, 2, and 3. And every time I catch up with you, it's like I've just told you my story, and your recall is, I don't even know how to describe it. But you're certainly in the field you should be in, because it's amazing. Murray,
it's my calling. It's what I'm meant to be doing.
This is
like, some people know they're an artist. Some people know they're a musician. Some people know they're a singer or whatever that is. But I actually know why I'm here and what my gift is. And, we have a defining moment in life. We participate in the doing. Then, I had a tragic accident, and it's like I got close to death in this accident. I'm going, this is my second chance to really live the best version of myself and the fullness of myself. But I had to grow, because I was the outdated version. I was the dysfunctional version. I was the traumatized, wounded version, trying to always struggling, but never arriving.
Can you tell me about the ego, Murray? Can you tell me about how it protects us, how it damages us? I know it's a massive topic, but it's something that is so applicable to all of us.
I think the ego is such a profound reality to understand. But when we look at ego, we're always looking at ego from the outside looking in. And we understand, oh, that's your ego. That means you're arrogant, or, you're a schmuck, or, there's a variety of things. And we think, oh, check him out. He's just full of ego. We've misunderstood the totality of what an ego is. And what I have to do is explain how the ego arrived. It's, ego, energy goes out, EGO, energy goes out. But the ego actually has a purpose. It has a role in a destructive way. And if I can just land these 2 words in there, ego means I'm in fear and I'm in survival. And then well, how could someone be arrogant if they're in fear? And yes, they are. It's like right down to road rage. Someone that's driving a car and steals 6 meters of your bitumen and you lose your shit, that's not you. That's your ego playing out because it felt threatened. Someone took something away from you, and you go, well, how do I recover this? Yeah, I'll have an outrage burst and say words that you don't know if that person is actually trying to pick up their children and they're running late at the school and they're just trying to get there quick. But we are triggered. The moment we get triggered, instead of staying on center and being really clear about ourselves, we default to our ego. And it's automatic. And then, when you get used to doing life, you get in the car, you don't think about putting your indicators on. You don't think about standing on the brakes. You don't think about turning the steering wheel. You just do that automatically. and it's an unconscious competent part of us. And ego runs rife in our body, and I'm going to talk about in our mind, talk about the embodiment as well of the ego and how it occupies us. But some people go, well, where did it come from? Where did the ego come from? And the way to understand ego is we can be in the egoic state, and we can be really disowned, withdrawn, curled up, feeling shame, blame, and really isolated. Or we can be in an absolute raging out moment, losing our shit, saying things that we are destructive and hurting. Where the ego is, it's trying to protect yourself, but in a dysfunctional way. So the way to explain the simplest way, I spend days explaining this. So, I've got like limited time to get this across, Ross. This is like, talk about a topic. Whoa. Okay. So to get ego across, when we come into the world, we're born, we're innocent, and then you get to 1, 2, 3 years old, and you got your parents, loving you up and everything like that. And then you start to get like your own opinion. You get your own idea. And I'm going to just say that most parents are at least 25 to 30 years out of date, understanding, if a child was born in 2023, they are out of date compared to when they were born and what it was like for them. So we're always in lag. Our psychology is in lag, and we're in lag with our children. Being a parent today is that you need to know what their world is like for them today. But we go, well, you don't know what it was like for me when I was your age, blah, blah, blah. We're always outdated. But you get to 5 years old, and that is the zone, that's the place where, as a parent in its outdated model, says, look, you need to become a somebody. And I'm going to just use the word somebody. Now, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. And when you go to your grandmother's place, I want you to behave like this. I want you to do this. And all of a sudden, this little person is told to be a somebody, not their authentic self, because they actually have their own authenticity. If you just let them grow into their authenticity, it's quite amazing. And we learn our value system through the household and through consequences and a variety of things. But we start to learn, and the parents will say, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. And all of a sudden, we may feel the wrath of toxic parents, say inappropriate things. They may say things, and all of a sudden, this little person that's 5 years old is actually under siege by the overbearing parent saying, you have to hug your grandmother before you leave, when they don't want to. So they're actually forced, you should hug her, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. And then eventually, in order to feel loved by the parents, in order to comply, they start to sell out portions of their own authenticity, and they start to separate from themselves. And I'm going to introduce the word separate child. The child is whole. But what happens? The child starts to separate from themselves. And then all of a sudden, the authentic, beautiful child is sitting over there going, if only I could do this, if only I can do that, if only I can do this, because they know they could get in trouble. They've realized that they're not good enough, or they've realized through the parental upbringing, they're not good enough. They feel shame. And I'm going to talk about how shame gets into the body, how not good enough starts, how unworthiness stuff, or they get blamed for something. And all of a sudden, the child separates. The disowned child learns to shut up, say nothing, withdrawn, do as you're told, and starts to disappear and becomes reserved, doesn't take little risks, doesn't approach things, and always is in a disowned state. And in that state, the separation, and then the other for some children, they get distorted. They become rebellious, they become demanding, they're little fighters, they become a variety of things. The authentic child separates, and we call that separate child. Now the child is separated. And once that separated happens, what comes in that space, in that void, is what we call the egoic self, the ego. It's recruited into this position to going, you have to protect me now. Remember, if you do this, you're going to get blamed. If you stand out, you're going to get chastised. If you stand out, you're going to get picked on. And, or if you don't lose your temper, no one will pay attention to you. So all of a sudden, this beast called ego starts to grow and grow and grow, and it gets very, very, very powerful. And all of a sudden, it becomes automatic. And then, you ever seen parents going, oh, you'll make a good train driver one day, or you'll make a great ambulance, person, or I think you're good with numbers and you'll become a good accountant, or I think you'll become a good school teacher. They start to listen to the narratives. They want to please their parents, but they're going, no, I don't want to do that. But they'll do things out of approval. If they do it out of approval, that means I'm liked. If they are liked, they feel loved. And remember, we are designed unconsciously in a destructive way, conditional love. That's why little kids go, look at me, look at me, look at me jump, look at me do this, look at me that. Because they're seeking approval, to be seen, to be witnessed. And if they're seen and witnessed, they know they've got their survival really in place, and mum and dad loves them. And if they're loved, we're going to be okay. And that topic, I'm going to talk about how that's so destructive in a relationship dynamic as well. So,
Murray, parents aren't doing this intentionally, are they? Because
we're a product of our parents, of their parents, and we will project this onto one day. I would say, in the next 40, 50 years, we're going to have it handled. Okay. In the meantime, we're all waking up, realizing that the ego gets set in, and you can see different family structures, how the child has the egoic self, the ego kicks in. That little person's in survival. Total survival and fear.
Murray, what are the behaviors you commonly see of people that have a separate child? It's a pretty broad question, but
a very broad question. The behaviors that I see play out in that grow up in the adult version is they actually grow up as an adult very disowned or very distorted, but they're rarely on center. They're really in a really solid, peaceful place. And, and what happens is we've got to understand, if you yell or scream at your child and they get pinned and they go into a shock and they have a breakdown and they cry and they're in it and they think they've done something wrong, we've actually installed a trauma in their body. And that trauma plays out as a wound in their behaviors.
And is that because we've passed on, so we've triggered, our ego's triggered? So if I've, say, completely lost control of my 3 children and I react, and as you say, I lash out and yell and then chastise them, that's my ego, my issue.
Yeah, that's
being
your
passed
level
on to them.
Yes, that's what I call toxic parent. That's what's passed on. It's unavoidable at this stage. I don't know any parent that's perfect, and that includes myself. I'm a parent, and I know they're going, well, God, I wish I would have done this a little bit different. Even myself, and I've done a lot of work to not come from ego. And the moment you start to wake up is when I'm not meant to be doing this. And the way to view that is, imagine one hand you got your consciousness here, and the other side, the other hand is the observer. And the observer says, hey, Ross, you shouldn't be doing this. This is okay. You shouldn't be doing this. And the conscious mind, if it's awake, going, great, I will not do that. But if you're not awake, you'll go, stuff it. They're going to bed early. That's it. It's all over. Off you go. And you could see that when you have an awakening and you're going, I could have done that better. I use a good example. The other day, I got this phone call and they said, Murray, look, my son had, he somehow got, he's only 12. He got these vapes, took him to school and was selling them. And he says, what do I do? Because normally I would get him and I would scream at him and I would, I'd yell, sometimes I'd lash out and sometimes I'd kick him in the butt and I said, and lock him in his room. I said, don't do any of that. Because that's your trigger. That's your ego handling. I said, why don't you just sit him down and say, hey, now you're innovative. You're an entrepreneur. You got some great ideas, but that stuff is really bad. It's not good for humanity. It's not good for people. And if you can create something amazing and use your entrepreneurial skills to create your own wealth, what a great idea. So I want to acknowledge what a genius you are. However, I think you've broken the school policy and they're upset and everything. Show them the lessons, the gifts on how to recreate a better future from the lesson. And he says, what my father would do would pull out the belt and I'd get a punishment, and said punishment doesn't work. Liberation into consciousness, into an awareness of the genius within that person is going to work. So you can do it with your ego, or you can consciously be aware. And you need to heal your wound with your father rather than project it onto your son. And I could hear him he was on the phone. He just collapsed. He said, oh my God. He says, I nearly broke his phone in half and everything. So I believe things can really, really change here. So when I'm working with people to deal with the ego runs rife into people, and it generally runs rife until they decide, I need to heal. I need to wake up for myself. When you see people out there with addictions, it's the ego is triggering that. People get addicted to substances. I feel like substances are everywhere. Sugar's a substance. Alcohol. There's drugs everywhere. It's eating disorders. You look at that. You look at that whole range, and I can just talk on this topic forever. And it's one person had an eating disorder. Well, they got yelled at so furiously that afterwards the mother said, look, I was over the top. I'm really sorry. I'm going to make you some beautiful dessert. This will make you happy. So that child was yelled, shamed, traumatized, wounded. And then the mother came along and says, I'll make you a beautiful meal. I'm really sorry. Mum was stressed at work, all that stuff, but I'll make you a nice meal. How that child adjusted to that trauma was its nervous system got co-regulated by mum and food. And hence, when that person gets worked up and all that, they go into an eating disorder. And just using that as an example. And next thing you know, this person just eats when they can't co-regulate their nervous system. So, and then when we get traumatized, you got to imagine when we get traumatized, that trauma sits in the fight and flight part of our brain, our amygdala part of their brain, which is the back here. And there's two of them. They sit together as a whole, touching. And the amygdala part of the brain, what happens instead of like, well, I better move quickly here or flight off, or I better fight for my life like an animal, it's like it's fight or flight. If they get traumatized, at the intensity of the trauma, it actually imprints the trauma in the amygdala part of the brain. So, for example, if you're walking along a path and you see a snake, your body instinctively moves quickly. It just does. It just leaps out of the way. That's a beautiful response. However, if you're in trauma and it's in the amygdala part of the brain and it's driven by ego and it's triggered, you go straight through there, straight through that, and you will say things that you wish that you'd never said. And that there is a healing process. That's got to be healed. So when I look at people, ego could be, it drives the dark side of us through fear and survival. There's a darkness to ego. It drives that part. And that's what happens to us. It's phenomenal.
Murray, when we're thinking day to day, how much is subconscious and how much is conscious?
Conscious is 10% of your mind. And it's like the iceberg. The other 90% is below the water. And it takes energy to go, you know what? I always say, you got to go down the rabbit hole, go down there and have a look at what is really going on. And it takes awareness, it takes courage, it takes everything. This is the work that we do. If you want to be liberated, you want to be free, and you want to be like the full director of your life, not a bunch of reactions. You need to know how to respond with grace and honor and a calm. It's like being the monk. You need to know how to do that. But if we are reactive and we in the reaction will pick up the dark and we will act it out. Totally act it out.
Our subconscious hides in the 90%, doesn't it? Sorry, our ego hides in the subconscious, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, because we've buried it in there. We've been doing it for so long. It's like I said, you don't think about turning the indicators on the car. It's already buried in there. You just do that. That's called unconscious competence. It's buried in there. You just do it automatically. Yeah.
Over the 4 days of processing people, are you still surprised at the changes you see?
Yeah. We stay in relationship with people. Yeah, Ross, this is incredible. Like, we're not the organization that comes out from America and does a one-off and disappears, or someone's going to do some kind of new process and they're on for generally they exist for 12 to 24 months. They're very short. They're in and then they disappeared. They're gone. Their website's gone. We've been around for 30 years, Ross. We are 30 years deep. I'm dealing now with people who I'm dealing with the grandchildren as adults, their mum, and then the grandmother, the mother, the granddaughter. I'm dealing with those three generations, and we've been in this, and I keep in some form of relationship with people on how they're doing. It's amazing when someone turns up at the workshop and they say, hi. I said, do you you don't know me, but, they're like 21 years old or 24. I said, I'm here for a special reason. So why? I said, well, because of you, my dad was in a dark place and he was going to attempt suicide, and he came and did your work. He's alive today. He's never thought about it ever since. He's done your work. He's grown. He's a fantastic father. And he has a great relationship with mom, and she's done the work too. And they talk about this work all the time. And they did that in 1996. And I'm just going, wow, you're here. Yeah, you're like a legend in our family. And I go, whoa, it's like I get blown away with that. And, so it's quite amazing how I get people that show up and we stay around, how's it going? And we deal with a lot of people on the land that, the cattle, they're networking amongst each other, saying how profound the work. Someone just rang me this morning and said, all the stations got together and they got like 50 staff each, and they all got together and they just talked about what the work is doing for them. And so I get surprised. You do our work, your kitchen table with the family will be the most beautifulest kitchen ceremony of fun and joy, and people learn to say, I love you. They connect. They're not, they're not emotionally constipated. They're not disconnected. They're not in the politics of family dynamics on who's what, when and how, and the competitives. They come from someone asked me, what is the most amazing thing for me? I love loving. I love to be in a love state, and I'm a full-on guy, it's like I'm full out. I'm a full-on, very masculine, but I can be very feminine. I can be very full-on, but I live through my own authentic masculinity. I never did. I lived through toxic masculinity. The guys, the bravado, and I used to live my femininity through women, like go, that's what femininity is. Women are like, you're meant to like a flower. No, it's like, I had no idea. My dad was a great guy, but he had 4 feelings: sad, bad, mad, and glad. That was it. He was like, he's a good guy, he's a good provider and everything like that. But he had 4 feelings. He's seriously emotionally constipated and, and all of that. But, I got toxic masculinity and, disowned femininity. It's like, but I feel so whole now, and that masculine and feminine is another big topic that could go on for another day's a topic, talking about it. But it's addressing ego. Ego will pull in the toxic masculinity. It'll pull in what I call the shadow side of masculinity. It'll pull in the shadow side of femininity, and same with women. And it'll pull in, and we work, our work, we work in the archetypes, and, when we work with the archetypes, is another topic. We talk about what the archetypes do. We talk about, the king or queen. Everyone needs to have a strong king and a very powerful king and a powerful queen. But you don't want to be a disowned queen that is powerless, no direction, not knowing where to go, or, a distorted king or queen that's a tyrant. You don't want tyranny in your house or a way of life, and then we talk about warrior, lover, magician. It's like, even the warrior, you don't want to be a disowned warrior, because if you're a disowned warrior, you will get bullied at school. You will cop it, if you copped it at school, it's because it was ego driven that made you disown. And we do that. Or you don't want to be the bully, because the bully is the distorted warrior, and that is ego driven. And they're all coming from fear and survival. Both sides are coming from fear and survival. But when you find your center, all of a sudden you're going, wow, I feel really powerful here. There's something so assured about that whole presence and knowing your power and your presence and everything about you that could lead and yet know how to be a great warrior. And there's that part. And when you embrace the full masculinity part of yourself, and you're not scared of going, I'm embracing my feminine side, because I know that I can hold my newborn son in my hand, in the palm of my hand. And how I held him, I was so feminine, so delicate with this newborn. That's femininity. And yet I'm a beautiful, fierce protector of my family. So, but beforehand I had shame about that, us guys, if we had too much femininity at school, you got mangled. So, learning that. So I think whatever happened to us, we either distorted or disowned. And the ego slips in. And the ego is an energetic force that we have recruited to save us from fear and survival. The person standing in the corner, being the hermit, is so scared of themselves and connection. They're terrified. What I call them disowned magicians. They can't connect, they can't play, they can't even tell a joke. They're fighting for their life inside because they don't know how to relate to humanity because they couldn't relate at home. And they got traumatized and something happened and the ego got in and they knew that their sanctuary was being in the corner and saying nothing. Maybe they were told to sit in the corner and shut up and say nothing and you're useless. When you say to a child, who do you think you are to deserve that? Think yourself lucky. What you're saying is you're an unworthy child. You're an unworthy child. Or, you compare your children going, well, look at your brother, or look at your sister. They're good at mathematics. What's going on for you here? You're comparing them. Instantly, they're going to feel not good enough. Why would you want to put your children in competition? They are dealing with not good enough stuff, just going to school knowing that they can't do maths as good as the kid next to them. Their own reference points of comparing themselves. What do you think they do to their teenagers? I mean, I facilitated teens around Australia for 11 years. I've worked with teens. I've worked with auditoriums of teens, and I know that peer group and comparison and comparing themselves is so paramount, huge. So I think, when we really understand the totality and the brutality of what the egoic self does. See, here's the tough part. You can't connect properly with your spirituality if the ego's there. It won't allow you. And that's why you hear the word coined, you need an ego death. And an ego death, we do these processes where you experience a full ego death into enlightenment. That's our real 3, workshop where you literally have to allow the ego to die. And then all of a sudden you feel redundant. See, how also the what happens with this happens to people, they reach a certain age in their life and they're gone, why did I pick being a paramedic? Why did I pick being an accountant? Why did I pick being a school teacher? Because they told me that I need to be a somebody.
Yeah.
Be good for you. And they get to that age where they start to have a relationship with themselves. Now, that there means like, instead of just looking in the mirror and going, well, I'm looking handsome today, they're looking in the mirror at the reflection of their identity. And what they see is pieces of their authenticity behind themselves and the reflection of who they're not. And they go, I'm actually I got a mortgage, 2 cars in the drive, 2.5 children. I'm really unhappy at my work. And I feel really sad because sadness means you've got no options left. You ever seen the look on a couple where their relationship has deteriorated and he's not happy at work and he's under duress by the pressures and the kids are kind of trying to work out life and they're wondering when it's going to stop and they just keep doing the weekly grind and they're wondering, well, what's my life all about? And then, and the men go through, what they call a midlife crisis, whatever. I think it's because they're actually waking up to the fact they're being who they're not. Doesn't mean it's over. It means that their ego has taken the morning of their life to lunchtime. There's always the morning of your life. You live your life to the morning and you're going, I need a wake-up call. I need a phoenix rising. I need to burn to the ashes all my old dysfunctionality. And now I need to go from lunchtime to the evening of my life. We've got these chapters in our life. And that's when, see, people think they have depression. They actually don't. People have what I call, to have a depressive state is like, is there a chemical imbalance here that you're not producing enough dopamine or you're not getting enough serotonin or you're not sleeping enough to get serotonin? All these words, they're just words. But in the process, they've ran out of options and they're in an unknown state and they become lost. And in the lostness, they've never been taught how to find that. And the way home is to find yourself first. First thing I say is know thyself. The way home is to unbecome all that stuff and to find you. And you go, okay, hi. When people do the work, sometimes they do the work, they do rule 1, they do rule 2, and all of a sudden I mean, oh my God, you're there. There you are. You've arrived. They almost are so aware they can see the leaves growing on the tree. They're really listening to their own narratives as it's coming out. They're really in their bodies. And it's interesting to live in an embodied state. So that's why when we process people around the ego, we just don't sit there going, hi, we need to talk about it. It's like, and I want to be really respectful here to, some incredible, there's some good therapists out there, some great coaches out there. I'm a great therapist. I'm a great coach. But I can't get the results unless I process people. It's like saying, hi, I'm going to use a metaphor here. Hi, I've got a broken leg and it's 90 degrees angle. And I thought I'm going to talk about this wounded issue. You can talk about it on the couch over and over and over and over again. You're still in your intellect. You're still in your mind going over and going, hi, look, it hurts. I just want to express the pain. It hurts. Unless we get into the embodiment of the process, unless we get into straightening it up, unless we get into the real experience of this, you're just going to talk it out and talk it out and talk it out and talk it out. And, like I have processed, 1,553 women who have been sexually abused to full recovery. That's how many women I have worked with. 1,553 women that have been sexually abused to full recovery. And some of them have been in therapy for 10, 15 years, 20 years. One was 25 years. Some of them even become therapists.
Murray, could we use the analogy that a lot of traditional therapy, again, said respectfully, you're just going backwards and forwards over the same track?
Yeah, look, I think they just don't have I think they're needed out there. I really do. Because they're the first point. People need to just check in and they need some support. But what happens is they don't have the facility how you got to go next level. If you want real growth, real transformation, you got to go the next level. You need to, this podcast will lead you to something else. It'll lead you there. People need to listen to the podcast, but it leads you to the next thing. So I believe that there's a tradition out there. It's like, for example, when I work with Vietnam vets, none of them suicide. When I work with people that come from Afghanistan, they don't suicide. They go home and they recreate their family. Mm. So I have a really incredible track history of just results. But it's through, Ross, it's through this embodiment. This embodiment. So, what I want to do is those people don't have the facility, but what we do is we have we're at a retreat. We work with people, and I have in my system here, we've got like a couple of hundred crew that are on training, and out of that we pick 35 to sometimes 38 to the most elite crew that are in peak performance, and they become on crew and they support the process. And how we process is we process people on their issues, but we use psychodrama, we use experiences, we use props, and we bring the egoic part to full view. Imagine for the first time you get to see the destruction of your ego and how it plays out. And then you get to see where it came from. You get to see how it started, and you start to unbecome. And then when I get those crew, then I use around about 8 people for your one journey, your one process. And we stay with you till you get the breakthrough. And all of a sudden you start to feel instantly different. You're going, you've changed. There's a whole process. We got a high tech people with the right music, the right props, the right dynamic, and then it's a full on 4 days. Just boom, one process after the next process after the next process. And you start to unbecome, but the more you unbecome, it happens paradoxically. If you unbecome 20%, you return to yourself 20%. You unbecome 50%, you return to yourself 50%. It works that way. And that, to me, is true liberation and freedom. When people go, I want to be free, and they go to the beach and they, the middle of the night, they yell out, I'm free. And then they get back in the car and they're driving towards their home and they feel like shit, going, oh God, no, I'm not free. But it felt good at the beach. It's like freedom to me, and liberation is wherever you're sitting, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. That's true freedom. Not, I'm on a trip in Bali and, oh God, I feel free. And then you're on the plane home going, oh shit, I'm going to the hellhole of life. That's not kind of work. That's not freedom. That's just an escape from the agony that you haven't addressed.
Murray, an observation as a participant, I cannot speak highly enough of the transformation that I've been involved in and watched others go through, but I really like how your crew are all past participants.
Yeah.
And as a participant, you do your own processing, but you watch other people's and what you get out of other people's and the emotions that it brings up in you. But then watching the crew who have been trained, the reactions they have when, say, a process has been so powerful that they themselves have been affected. It is extraordinary.
Yeah, you can't escape the truth. And, sometimes, I've heard, for processed over 30, I've heard some incredible stories and life's journeys of people's realities. And you feel it, but it doesn't stick in you. It just runs through you. It's like, oh, just goes through you. But if you're like wiped out afterwards, then that means you got some residual circumstances or situations that you need to address. It's like it's hit that area and your body goes into contraction, and you know when your body's contracted. You know how have you ever had that moment when you're talking to someone and you don't like them and you get all tense, your body goes into contraction? It's like
any days.
yeah. And then you feel your voice change.
Yeah.
And they say, how you doing? You go, really good. It's like you're saying it with a contracted voice. You're actually bullshitting to yourself. You got to go back and go, wow, I'm triggered by this person. And, they remind me maybe a bit of myself, or I don't like the way they spoke to me, or there's a trigger in you. And I think with crew, they love the work. They come back because they want to contribute to humanity, but they are really clear what the concept of mental health is and how it adds to their life, and being clear and uncluttered with historical issues to live a life where all you need is like good food and clean air, and you can have the most wildest time. It's like you don't need substances to feel great. You don't need a holiday to feel great. They're all extras. You don't need a champagne to feel great. You are on thin air and you are connected. And when you get connected to yourself and you reclaim the orphan child in you that lives with the truth of your authenticity back into your own embodiment as an individual, you are speaking for yourself. Not many people speak for themselves. They speak from their conditioning. They speak from their traumas. They speak from their wounds. We are a collection point of everyone else's. It's like, and we don't know that we are speaking from that. We think everyone else has an accent. We think we're like really clear. It's like, when we hear someone go, oh, that's a unique accent, and they're doing the same thing. And I think we have to have an awareness. So when you're talking about ego is the thing that separated your authenticity. That's when people run around and going, I actually don't know who I am. I don't know who I am. And I don't know how to love myself. Sticking up on the mirror and going, I love me, I love me, is bullshit. That's just an affirmation, throwing it at the wall, but it just drops. There's a real knowing when you love yourself. You don't have to say it.
Murray,
we're really powerful about that.
When you say when people wake up, so we use the analogy of a wall, and you wake up and you see a crack in the wall, does materialism and drug taking and alcohol and all sort of other things come in as like the paint to go over that? Because people are frightened. If I look through that wall and I crack through and see my true self, I could be thrown into complete chaos here. And it's tough. They don't want to go through the wall. They'd rather just paint over it.
Yeah, it's called denial. I'll deny that. I think it's a river in Egypt, the Nile. It's like they are in some kind of denial. What they're really saying is, I'm so terrified to wake up to my own shit that I'm living in, my own denial that I'm living in, my own existence, and I have no idea how to deal with it. So I'll just put another coat of paint over it. Yes, it'll be cracked by next week, but at least I've made it through the week. Whereas, let's get to the reason of it all. And when people wake up, sometimes you wake up going, wow, I've realized that I'm in a job I don't like. And I realize that our relationship is really disconnected, and we need to find each other again and open our hearts. I mean, you'd be quite surprised how many people have what I call a sexual-based connection, but that only lasts for a time frame because it's only meant to, unless you go into the quality of the erotic. And, that's a whole, I talk about that in Tantra, where you can have the most mind-blowing sex for the rest of your life with the one person. But what happens is if they're unconscious and in denial, and then they come from the heart, and they, when the heart loves, you could love someone, but sometimes it's codependent love. And if you're doing codependent love, you're going to get annoyed with your partner. You're not going to like them. And then eventually your eyes will turn somewhere else. So you got those things. But there's not many couples that have a really good quality soul-to-soul connection. And that's spirit to spirit, soul to soul. I call that the twin flame. And when you have a soul connection, you will want to be with each other all the time because your soul is dancing in the ecstatic bliss, connecting with each other. But if you're disconnected and you're not connecting with you, you won't have a soul connection. You'll just imagine, if I had someone else, would be better. You're always escaping. And these qualities, understanding this, is so important. That's why it's important to understand this stuff. And the ego keeps it all together. It's really interesting. Have you ever seen people resist change?
Mm-hmm. I've participated in it.
They get there and you can see them and they're like, you go, if you say to someone, look, can you do me a favor? Can you just resist your body? Just tighten it up, lock it up, and just stay in resistance and crunch it up into a ball and be all resisting. Now try and communicate through that. Well, people that resist demonstrate a fixed way of being, that they think they're more right than anyone else. And they are locked up with fear and survival, and they only trust the known thing that they've done repetitively. But they don't walk into the unknown. And they don't like change. And my theory is that we need to grow at the speed of change. Well, someone says, how fast is that? I said, have you ever seen your children go to bed and wake up different the next day? You need to still be growing at the speed of change. And I think that's really important. Because, Ross, we live in a world where our time is so precious. And it's like being on the outside and watching a train go by, and the train's got these little square windows. And those windows are just little moments of your life. And all of a sudden it's like the train goes past, you just see all these windows. All of a sudden you see the first 40 years go by. You're going, whoa, but the train's gone. Irreversible. You cannot retrieve them. And people waste life. They waste time in resistance rather than being fluid with growth and change and being a role model for their children, but seeing their children, they go to school, they grow, they expand. People have this right, well, I've gone to year 12, I have a uni degree, and I've got a good job, and I don't want to change anymore. Well, there's a complication there. Why would you want to? When the tree stops growing, it's dying. It's nature's law. We're always growing or we're always deteriorating, one or the other. When the tree stops dying, when the tree stops growing, it's deteriorating. You want to be always growing. It's the elixir. It's the anti-aging part of life. It's the fuel that makes things work.
Murray Mazarik, you are extraordinary. What you have done and what you continue to do for people is, I myself and so many people, we just want to scream it from the rooftop. Unfortunately, People will come when they are ready. I would love it if you could return to the show. I would love to discuss further concepts if you would be willing. We've just raced through an hour in the blink of an eye.
Wow,
And
really?
Murray, I've been hanging off every word, and I know the listeners and the viewers will. Thank you so much for joining us on the Bare Facts today.
Thank you, Ross. I'll be back.
Good.
Love to support your journey.
Well, we'll try and find another hole in your very busy calendar. But once again, I really want to repeat this. You are extraordinary, Murray, and I'm very grateful that you have come into Sally in my life as long as many others.
What a great honor that is. Thank you. Good to be a part of your life.